The smell of rotting vegetables and discarded meat scraps assaulted Clara Hartwell's senses as she pushed aside a broken crate in the alley behind Morrison's general store, her stomach twisting with the kind of hunger that made even garbage look appetizing. It was September 1881 in Silver Ridge, Arizona territory, and the mining town had seen better days, just like Clara herself. Her worn calico dress, once a cheerful yellow, now hung loose on her thin frame, the fabric patched so many times it resembled a quilt more than a garment. She had been beautiful once, or so her mother had told her before the fever took her 6 months ago, leaving Clara utterly alone at 22 years old with nothing but debts her father had accumulated before he disappeared into the desert 3 years prior. Clara's fingers closed around something solid, a half-rotted potato that still had some good flesh beneath the blackened skin. She quickly tucked it into her apron pocket, her movements practiced and efficient. This was her third day scrounging through the refuse of Silver Ridge, trying to stay alive while searching for work that no one seemed willing to give a woman with no references and no family. The boarding house had kicked her out 4 days ago when she could no longer pay, and she had been sleeping in an abandoned prospector's shack on the edge of town, the kind of place that leaked when it rained and offered no protection from the scorpions that scuttled across the dirt floor at night. "You are not going to find anything worth eating in there." The voice startled Clara so badly she knocked over a bucket of kitchen slop, sending a foul-smelling wave across the packed dirt. She spun around, her heart hammering, and found herself looking up at a man who seemed to block out the afternoon sun. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that strained against a clean cotton shirt the color of creek stones. His hat was pushed back on his head, revealing sun-bronzed skin and eyes the exact shade of honey when light shone through it. A bandana hung loose around his neck, and his boots, though dusty from travel, were of good quality leather. Everything about him spoke of someone who had not missed many meals. "I was not asking for your opinion," Clara said, lifting her chin even as heat flooded her cheeks. She hated being seen like this, hated the pity she saw flickering in those honey-colored eyes. "Please go about your business." Instead of leaving, the cowboy tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that made her want to squirm. "When did you last eat? A real meal, I mean." "That is none of your concern." Clara turned back to the trash pile, determined to ignore him until he left. Her fingers trembled slightly as she moved aside a bundle of rags, searching for anything else that might be salvageable. Behind her, she heard the creak of leather and the jingle of spurs, and she assumed he was finally walking away. Good. She did not need charity from strangers, did not need anyone looking at her with that mixture of pity and discomfort that had become so familiar. "Here." Clara turned again and nearly gasped. The cowboy had returned, and his arms were laden with supplies. Fresh supplies. A cloth-wrapped bundle that smelled like bread, a paper package that had to contain meat from the butcher, a small sack of what looked like flour, and several tins of vegetables. He stood there, waiting, his expression patient but determined. "I cannot accept that," Clara said, even as her mouth watered and her stomach cramped with longing. "I do not take charity." "It is not charity," the cowboy said calmly. "It is basic human decency. You are hungry, and I have the means to help. There is no shame in accepting help when you need it." "There is every shame in it," Clara shot back, but her voice lacked conviction. She had not eaten anything substantial in 3 days. The potato in her pocket felt pathetically inadequate now, faced with actual food. "I do not even know you. Why would you do this?" The cowboy shifted the packages slightly, adjusting his grip. "My name is James Colton. I run a cattle ranch about 15 miles north of here, the Broken Creek Ranch. I came into town for supplies and saw you back here. As for why I am doing this, let us just say I know what it is like to be hungry, to be desperate. Someone helped me once when I needed it. I am just passing that forward." Clara stared at him, searching for any sign of mockery or ulterior motive, but James Colton's face remained open and honest. There was kindness in his eyes, but also a kind of understanding that suggested he truly did know what it felt like to struggle. Finally, her hunger won out over her pride. She stepped forward and held out her arms, and James carefully transferred the supplies to her. The weight of real food in her arms nearly brought tears to her eyes. The bread was still warm, probably fresh from the bakery that morning. The packages were neatly tied with string, everything clean and wholesome. Clara clutched them to her chest, trying to find words adequate to express her gratitude. "Thank you," she finally whispered. "You have no idea what this means." "Where are you staying?" James asked, his brow furrowing slightly. "You should not be living in a place where you have to dig through trash for food." Clara hesitated, unwilling to admit she was squatting in an abandoned shack. "I am between residences at the moment, but I will manage. I always do." James looked like he wanted to press the issue, but he simply nodded. "The boarding house on Main Street is run by Mrs. Patterson. She is a fair woman, and if you tell her I sent you, she will give you a room on credit until you can find work." "I have been looking for work," Clara said, unable to keep the frustration from her voice. "No one wants to hire a woman alone, especially one without references." Something flickered across James's face, an idea taking shape. "Can you cook? Clean? Handle ranch work?" Clara straightened her shoulders. "I can do all of those things. My mother taught me well before she passed. I can cook, clean, sew, tend a garden, preserve food, and I'm not afraid of hard work." "Then I might have a job for you," James said slowly. "My ranch needs a housekeeper. The previous one left last month to get married, and I have been making do on my own. But I am better with cattle than with keeping a house in order. The job comes with room and board plus wages. It is honest work, respectable work." Clara's heart leaped, but years of disappointment had taught her caution. "Why would you offer me a job? You do not know anything about me." "I know you are willing to search through trash rather than steal, which speaks to your character," James said. "I know you are proud, which means you will work hard to earn your keep. And I know you need help, which I am in a position to provide. If it does not work out, we can part ways with no hard feelings, but I think you might be exactly what the Broken Creek needs." Clara looked down at the food in her arms, then back at James Colton's open, honest face. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to question this stroke of good fortune. But what choice did she have? Continue digging through garbage and sleeping in a shack, hoping something better came along? At least this was a concrete opportunity, a chance to pull herself out of the desperate situation she found herself in. "When would I start?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning, if you're willing," James said. "I need to finish my business in town today, but I can pick you up at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house at first light. We will head out to the ranch. I will show you around, and you can start getting settled." Clara took a deep breath, making her decision. "All right, I accept. And thank you, Mr. Colton. For the food, for the opportunity, for everything." "James," he corrected with a small smile. "If we are going to be working together, we should use first names, and you are welcome, Miss Hartwell, Clara Hartwell." She managed a smile of her own, the first genuine one in weeks. "I will see you tomorrow morning, James." James tipped his hat to her, a gesture both courteous and oddly charming. "Tomorrow morning, Clara, go get yourself a room at Mrs. Patterson's and have a good meal. You look like you could use both." He walked away then, his spurs jingling softly with each step, and Clara stood in the alley clutching her armful of supplies and wondering if her luck had finally turned. She allowed herself one moment to watch him go, noting the confident set of his shoulders and the easy grace with which he moved, before she turned and headed for Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. The boarding house was a neat two-story building painted white with green shutters, far nicer than the flop house she had been staying in before. Mrs. Patterson herself answered the door, a plump woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and shrewd blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "I am looking for a room," Clara said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "James Colton said you might have one available and that I could pay on credit until I start working for him." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened immediately. James sent you? Well, that is good enough for me. That boy has never steered me wrong. Come in, come in. You look half-starved, child. When did you last eat? I am about to remedy that, Clara said, holding up her packages. Mr. Colton, James provided these for me. That sounds like him, Mrs. Patterson said with an approving nod. Always looking out for folks who need it. Come on, I will show you to a room, and then you can use the kitchen to prepare something. Or if you prefer, I have stew on the stove that I can offer you. No charge for tonight, considering the circumstances. The kindness nearly undid Clara. She had grown so accustomed to doors closing in her face, to suspicious looks and outright rejection, that this open welcome felt almost surreal. That is very generous of you, Mrs. Patterson. Nonsense. We take care of our own here in Silver Ridge, especially when someone is trying to help themselves. Mrs. Patterson led Clara up a narrow staircase to a small but clean room on the second floor. It had a real bed with a quilt, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a window that looked out over the main street. After nights in the abandoned shack, it looked like paradise. This is perfect, Clara said softly. Thank you. You're welcome, dear. Now come down to the kitchen when you're ready, and we will get some food into you. You are all skin and bones. Clara set her packages on the bed and took a moment to simply stand in the room, letting the reality of her changed circumstances sink in. This morning she had woken up on a dirt floor, hungry and desperate. Tonight she would sleep in a real bed with a full stomach. And tomorrow she would start a new job at a ranch, working for a man who had shown her kindness without expecting anything in return. It felt like a dream, the kind she had stopped letting herself have. She washed her face and hands in the basin, scrubbing away the grime of the alley, then headed downstairs to the kitchen. Mrs. Patterson served her a generous bowl of beef stew with fresh bread, and Clara ate slowly, savoring every bite. The food settled warm and comforting in her empty stomach, and she felt strength returning to her limbs. So you're going to work at the Broken Creek, Mrs. Patterson said, settling into a chair across from Clara with a cup of coffee. That is a good place. James runs it well, keeps honest hands, treats people fair. He built that ranch up from nothing, you know. Came here 7 years ago with barely 2 coins to rub together and a dream of having his own land. Now he has one of the most successful operations in the territory. Clara listened with interest, piecing together a picture of the man who had helped her. He said someone helped him when he needed it. Is that how he got started? Partly, Mrs. Patterson said. Old man Whitaker owned the land before James. He was getting on in years and needed help running the place. James worked for him for 3 years, learning the business, and when Whitaker died, he left the ranch to James in his will. Some folks thought James had taken advantage of the old man, but those who knew Whitaker understood. James had been like a son to him, and Whitaker wanted to make sure the ranch went to someone who would care for it properly. That explains his comment about someone helping him, Clara said. James has a good heart, Mrs. Patterson continued, but do not mistake kindness for weakness. He is tough when he needs to be, fair but firm with his ranch hands, and he does not tolerate laziness or dishonesty. If you work hard for him, he will treat you right, but do not expect him to coddle you. I do not expect coddling, Clara assured her. I just want a chance to prove myself. Then you will do fine. Mrs. Patterson smiled warmly. Now finish your stew and get some rest. You have a big day tomorrow. Clara did exactly that. She finished her meal, thanked Mrs. Patterson profusely, and climbed the stairs to her room. She carefully stored the supplies James had given her, changed into her only nightgown, and slipped between clean sheets for the first time in days. Despite her exhaustion, sleep did not come immediately. Her mind kept replaying the encounter in the alley, the way James had looked at her with understanding rather than pity, the easy kindness with which he had filled her arms with supplies. She had met many men in her 22 years, but none quite like James Colton. She finally drifted off with a sense of anticipation she had not felt in a long time, wondering what tomorrow would bring. True to his word, James arrived at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house just as the sun was painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Clara was already awake, dressed in her cleanest dress, a pale blue calico that had seen better days but was at least presentable. She had tied her dark brown hair back with a ribbon and scrubbed her face until it shone. When Mrs. Patterson called up the stairs that her ride was here, Clara grabbed her small carpet bag containing all her worldly possessions and hurried down. James stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking fresh and well-rested. He had a wagon hitched outside, a sturdy vehicle with a bench seat and a covered cargo area. When he saw Clara, he smiled, and she noticed for the first time that he had a dimple in his left cheek. "Good morning, Clara. Are you ready?" "I am," she said, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. Inside, her stomach was doing nervous flips, but she refused to let it show. The ride to the Broken Creek Ranch took about an hour and a half. They followed a well-worn road north out of Silver Ridge, the landscape gradually shifting from the dusty streets of town to open rangeland dotted with scrub brush and occasional stands of cottonwood trees. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and hazy in the morning light. James kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the ranch. "We run about 500 head of cattle right now," he explained. "Mostly longhorns, some Herefords I've been experimenting with. I have 4 regular ranch hands, Tom, Miguel, Charlie, and a kid named Billy who is still learning the ropes. They are good men, hard workers. They bunk in the ranch hands' quarters, a separate building from the main house." "And the main house?" Clara asked. "And what is it like?" "It is not fancy," James said honestly, "but it is solid. 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a main room, and a porch that wraps around 2 sides. Whitaker built it to last, good timber and stone. Since his wife died, it has been pretty much just a functional space, but I've always thought it could use a woman's touch to make it feel like a real home." Clara felt a flutter of excitement at the challenge. "I can do that. I am good at making a house feel welcoming." "I am counting on it," James said with another of those warm smiles. They fell into a comfortable silence for a while. The only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels and the soft thud of the horses' hooves on the packed earth. Clara found herself stealing glances at James, noting the easy way he handled the reins, the relaxed set of his shoulders. There was something inherently calming about his presence, a steadiness that made her feel safe. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Of course." "Why did you really help me yesterday? I mean, I appreciate it more than I can say, but most people would have just walked past. What made you stop?" James was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. "I told you I know what it is like to be desperate. That was not an exaggeration. Before I came to Silver Ridge, I was drifting from place to place, taking whatever work I could find, often going hungry. I was in a town in New Mexico, broke and starving, when a woman who ran a cafe gave me a meal and did not ask for payment. She told me that kindness was meant to be passed on, not paid back. That stuck with me. When I saw you yesterday, I saw myself 7 years ago, and I knew I had to help." Clara felt a lump form in her throat. "I am glad you did." "So am I," James said quietly. They arrived at the Broken Creek Ranch around mid-morning. Clara's first impression was one of ordered efficiency. The main house was exactly as James had described. A sturdy structure of timber and stone with a wide porch and a tin roof that gleamed in the sunlight. Nearby stood a large barn, several corrals with horses and cattle, and a smaller building that must be the bunkhouse. Everything was well maintained, the fences in good repair, the grounds tidy. It was clear that James took pride in his property. James helped Clara down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist. She tried not to notice the warmth of his touch or the way her heart skipped when their eyes met. This was her employer, nothing more. She needed this job, needed the stability it offered, and she could not afford to complicate things with foolish romantic notions. "Let me show you the house," James said, leading her up the porch steps. The interior was spacious and practical, just as he had promised. The main room held a large stone fireplace several comfortable chairs, and a dining table that could seat 8. The kitchen was equipped with a good stove, plenty of counter space, and shelves stocked with basic supplies. James showed her the bedrooms, pointing out the one that would be hers, a pleasant space at the back of the house with windows overlooking a small garden that had gone somewhat wild. That garden was Mrs. Whitaker's pride and joy, James said. After she died, Whitaker could not bring himself to tend it, and I am afraid I have neglected it too. If you have an interest in gardening, feel free to do what you like with it. I would love that, Clara said, already imagining what she could do with the space. Vegetables, herbs, maybe some flowers to brighten the place up. James left her to settle in, promising to return in an hour to introduce her to the ranch hands and go over her duties in more detail. Clara unpacked her meager belongings, hanging her 2 spare dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her few personal items on the dresser. The room was simply furnished, but comfortable, with a real mattress on the bed and curtains at the windows. Compared to the abandoned shack or even Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, it felt luxurious. She spent a few minutes exploring the rest of the house, taking mental inventory of what needed to be done. The place was not dirty, exactly, but it had the neglected air of a house where no one paid much attention to details. Dust had accumulated in corners, the windows needed cleaning, and the kitchen could use a thorough scrubbing. But these were manageable tasks, and Clara felt her spirits lift at the prospect of having real work to do, work that mattered. When James returned, he brought the ranch hands with him. Tom was the oldest, a weathered man in his 50s, with a grizzled beard and kind eyes. Miguel was younger, maybe 30, with a ready smile and a courteous manner. Charlie was stocky and red-faced, probably in his early 40s, and Billy was just a kid, barely 18 if that, with freckles and an eager expression. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Clara Hartwell," James said. "She is our new housekeeper. I expect you to treat her with respect and courtesy at all times. Clara, these are my ranch hands. If you need anything heavy moved or any help with repairs, they are at your service." The men all nodded politely, tipping their hats. Tom spoke for the group. "Welcome to the Broken Creek, Miss Hartwell. We are glad to have you here. The boss does his best, but the place has been missing a woman's touch." "Thank you," Clara said warmly. "I am happy to be here, and I look forward to working with all of you." After the introductions, James outlined Clara's duties. She would be responsible for cooking meals, keeping the house clean, doing laundry, and managing household supplies. She would also prepare lunches for the ranch hands when they were working close to the house. In return, she would receive room and board plus $30 a month, wages that seemed generous to Clara given her circumstances. "I will not micromanage you," James said. "You know how to run a household better than I do. I trust you to handle things as you see fit. If you need to purchase supplies from town, let me know, and I will arrange it. And if anything comes up that you are not comfortable with or that you need help with, my door is always open." Clara nodded, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "I will do my best." "I know you will," James said, and the confidence in his voice steadied her. Clara threw herself into the work with determination. The first few days were exhausting as she deep cleaned the house from top to bottom, washing windows, scrubbing floors, beating rugs, and organizing the kitchen. She baked bread and prepared hearty meals, earning approving nods from the ranch hands who had been making do with James's basic cooking. She mended torn shirts and patched worn trousers, tackled the mountain of laundry, and began planning how to restore the neglected garden. James was as good as his word, giving her space to work, but always available if she had questions. Clara found herself looking forward to meal times when he would join her at the kitchen table, the two of them sharing food and conversation. She learned that he was 29 years old, originally from Missouri, and had come west seeking opportunity after his parents died. He was thoughtful and well-spoken, with a dry sense of humor that often caught her off guard and made her laugh. For his part, James found himself increasingly drawn to Clara. She was intelligent and capable, transforming his house into a real home with her attention to detail and natural warmth. But it was more than that. There was a strength to her, a resilience that he admired. She had been digging through trash just days ago, but there was no self-pity in her, no bitterness. She worked hard, took pride in what she did, and faced each day with quiet determination. She was also lovely, with dark hair that caught the light and deep brown eyes that seemed to see right through him. By the end of her first week, James knew he was in trouble. This was supposed to be a simple employer-employee relationship, but he could not stop thinking about Clara, could not stop noticing the way she hummed while she worked, or the gentle way she spoke to the horses when she thought no one was listening. He found excuses to be in the house more often, to linger over meals, to seek her opinion on matters that he could have easily decided himself. Clara was fighting her own battle. She had not come to the Broken Creek looking for romance, had not expected to feel anything beyond gratitude for James. But there was something about him that drew her like a moth to flame. The way he treated everyone with respect, from the youngest ranch hand to the oldest. The quiet competence with which he ran the ranch, the kindness in his eyes when he looked at her. She tried to tell herself it was just gratitude, just relief at having found safety and stability, but her racing heart when he entered a room told a different story. Things came to a head on a warm afternoon 2 weeks after Clara's arrival. She had been working in the garden, clearing away dead plants and preparing the soil for new planting. It was hot work, and she had tied her hair up and rolled up her sleeves, not caring how she looked. She was so absorbed in her task that she did not hear James approach until he spoke. "You have made real progress out here." Clara straightened up, pushing a stray lock of hair from her face and leaving a smudge of dirt on her cheek in the process. "Oh, hello. I did not hear you come up. Yes, I think this garden can be restored. The soil is still good, and there are some perennials that just need attention. I was thinking of planting vegetables mainly, but maybe some flowers near the house too." James smiled, reaching out without thinking to gently wipe the dirt from her cheek. The gesture was intimate, tender, and they both froze as awareness crackled between them. Clara's eyes widened, her breath catching, and James realized what he had done. "I am sorry," he said quickly, dropping his hand. "That was inappropriate." "No," Clara said softly, "it was not." They stared at each other for a long moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. James took a step closer, his hand coming up to cup her face properly this time, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "Clara," he said quietly, "I know I should not say this. You work for me, and it is not right to put you in an awkward position. But I cannot stop thinking about you. These past 2 weeks have been the best I can remember, and it is because of you. Not just because you have made this house a home, but because you are here. Because I get to see you every day, talk to you, hear your laugh." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "James, I feel the same way. I have been trying to tell myself it was just gratitude, but it is more than that, so much more." James let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "What are we going to do about this?" "I do not know," Clara admitted. "I need this job, James. I need the security it provides, but I cannot pretend I do not have feelings for you." "You're not going to lose your job," James said firmly, "no matter what happens between us. You will always have a place here if you want it, but Clara, I would like to court you properly if you will allow it. I want to do this right." Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears. "I would like that very much." James smiled, that wonderful dimple appearing in his cheek, and slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, a promise more than a demand, and Clara felt something inside her that had been cold and frightened for so long finally warm and relax. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally pulled apart, both were slightly breathless. James rested his forehead against hers, his hands still cradling her face. "I am going to do everything I can to make you happy," he promised. "You already have," Clara whispered. Their courtship unfolded with the steady inevitability of the seasons changing. James courted Clara with old-fashioned propriety, mindful of her reputation and the fact that they lived under the same roof. He brought her wildflowers from the range, rode out with her on Sunday afternoons to show her the beautiful corners of the ranch, and spent long evenings on the porch talking about everything and nothing. They shared their histories, the sorrows and joys that had shaped them, building a foundation of understanding and trust. The ranch hands noticed, of course, but they approved. Tom told James privately that he had never seen the boss so happy and that Miss Clara was exactly the kind of woman a man like James deserved. Mrs. Patterson, when Clara visited town for supplies, gave her a knowing smile and said she had seen this coming from the start. As summer deepened into fall, Clara's life settled into a rhythm that felt almost too good to be true. She tended the garden, harvested vegetables, and preserved them for winter. She sewed curtains for the windows and braided rag rugs for the floors. She cooked and cleaned and made the Broken Creek Ranch feel like a real home. And through it all, her love for James grew deeper and stronger. James, for his part, could hardly believe his good fortune. He had gone into town that September day looking for supplies and found something infinitely more valuable. Clara had brought light into his life, warmth and laughter, and a sense of completion he had not even known he was missing. She was his partner in every way that mattered, interested in the ranch and offering insights that proved surprisingly valuable. She was smart and capable, but also tender and affectionate, and James found himself thinking more and more about making their arrangement permanent. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset behind the mountains, James took Clara's hand in his. "Clara, there is something I want to ask you." She turned to him, her dark eyes curious. "What is it?" James took a deep breath, suddenly more nervous than he had been facing down a stampede. "These past 2 months have been the happiest of my life. You have transformed this ranch, transformed me. I cannot imagine my life without you in it, and I do not want to try. Clara Hartwell, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, James, I will marry you." James let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, kissing her soundly. When they finally broke apart, both laughing, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "It was my mother's," he said. "The only thing I have left of her. I would be honored if you would wear it." Clara held out her hand, trembling with emotion, and James slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been meant for her all along. They were married in early November in a simple ceremony at the small church in Silver Ridge. Mrs. Patterson insisted on hosting a reception at the boarding house, and what seemed like the entire town turned out to celebrate. Tom and the other ranch hands scrubbed up and looked almost respectable in their Sunday best, grinning broadly as they watched James and Clara exchange vows. The local preacher, Reverend Matthews, pronounced them husband and wife, and when James kissed his bride, a cheer went up from the assembled guests. The reception was a joyful affair with food, music, and dancing. Clara wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her make, with a crown of autumn flowers in her hair. She had never felt more beautiful or more loved. James could not take his eyes off her, and more than once Clara caught him just staring at her with such open adoration that it made her blush. As the party wound down and the sun began to set, James and Clara climbed into the wagon for the ride back to the ranch, now truly their home. The ranch hands had gone ahead to give them privacy, and the house was quiet and welcoming when they arrived. Someone, probably Tom, had lit lamps throughout the house, and there were wildflowers on the table. James carried Clara over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the main room. He cupped her face in his hands, his expression suddenly serious. "I love you, Clara Colton," he said. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes to me." "I could never regret it," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved me, James, not just from hunger or poverty, but from loneliness and despair. You gave me a home, a purpose, and a love I never thought I would find. I love you so much." They kissed then, husband and wife, and the world outside ceased to exist. There was only the two of them, the promise they had made, and the future stretching bright and beautiful before them. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. That winter was harsh, with heavy snows that made travel difficult and temperatures that dropped low enough to threaten the cattle. James and the ranch hands worked long hours ensuring the herd survived, and Clara kept the home fires burning, providing hot meals and warm comfort when the men came in exhausted and half frozen. There were also adjustments to be made. Clara was still learning the rhythms of ranch life, and James was learning how to be a husband after years of living alone. They had their disagreements, as any couple does, but they faced them together with honesty and respect. Clara never forgot where she had been, the desperate woman digging through trash, and she never took for granted the life James had helped her build. And James never forgot the courage it had taken for Clara to accept his help, to trust him, to open her heart despite everything she had lost. Spring came with new life. The cattle began calving, the garden burst into bloom with the seeds Clara had planted, and one morning in April, Clara woke up feeling distinctly unwell. At first, she thought it was something she had eaten, but when the nausea continued for several days, accompanied by a strange fatigue, she began to suspect the truth. Mrs. Patterson, when Clara visited town and confided her symptoms, confirmed her suspicion with a knowing smile. "Sounds like you are expecting, dear. Congratulations." Clara rode back to the ranch in a daze of joy and terror. A baby. She was going to have a baby. She and James were going to be parents. That evening after supper, she took his hand and led him out to the porch where they had spent so many evenings talking and dreaming. "James, I have something to tell you." He looked at her, concern immediately clouding his features. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine," Clara assured him quickly. "Better than fine, actually. James, we are going to have a baby. I am expecting." For a moment, James just stared at her, processing the information. Then his face broke into the widest smile Clara had ever seen. He let out a shout of joy, picked her up, and spun her around. "A baby! We are going to have a baby!" He set her down carefully, suddenly anxious. "I did not hurt you, did I?" "Or the baby?" Clara laughed, wiping tears from her eyes. "No, we are both fine. But we are going to have a lot to prepare in the next several months." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. James was attentive to the point of being slightly overbearing, constantly asking if Clara was comfortable, if she needed anything, if she should be resting. Clara bore his fussing with good humor, understanding it came from love and concern. She continued her work around the house, adjusting her activities as her body changed. The ranch hands were equally protective, Tom especially, who had daughters of his own and understood the preciousness of new life. Their son was born on a cold December night during a rare snowstorm. The midwife, Mrs. Chen from town, had come to stay at the ranch a week before the baby was due, and it was a good thing she had. Labor came on fast and fierce, and there was no time to do anything but let nature take its course. James paced the main room, listening to Clara's cries and feeling utterly helpless. Tom stayed with him, offering quiet support born of experience. When the baby's first wail finally pierced the air, James nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Chen emerged a few minutes later, smiling broadly. "You have a son, Mr. Colton, a healthy boy with good lungs, and your wife did wonderfully. She is tired, but fine. You can go see them now." James practically ran to the bedroom. Clara lay propped up on pillows, exhausted and pale, but smiling. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in the quilt Mrs. Patterson had made for them. James approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe, and looked down at his son for the first time. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. He was the most beautiful thing James had ever seen, aside from his wife. Tears streamed down James's face as he gently touched one small hand, marveling when tiny fingers wrapped around his much larger one. "He is perfect," James whispered. "You are amazing. I love you so much." "I love you too," Clara said softly. "Do you want to hold your son?" James nodded, not trusting his voice. and Clara carefully transferred the baby into his arms. James cradled the infant with surprising gentleness for such a big man, staring down at the tiny face with an expression of wonder and overwhelming love. "What should we name him?" Clara asked. "Clara." "I was thinking William," James said, "after your father, William James Colton." Clara's eyes filled with fresh tears. Her father had made mistakes, terrible ones that had left her destitute. But he had also been the man who taught her to read, who had encouraged her curiosity, who had loved her in his flawed way. Naming their son after him felt like a redemption, a way to honor the good while acknowledging the past. "William James Colton," she repeated. "It is perfect." The years that followed were full and rich. William, whom they called Will, grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his mother's dark hair and his father's honey-colored eyes. The ranch prospered under James's careful management, allowing them to expand the herd and hire additional help. Clara continued to be the heart of the home, creating traditions and memories that bound their family together. When Will was 3, they were blessed with a daughter, whom they named Sarah after James's mother. She was a sunny child with blonde curls and a laugh that could brighten the darkest day. 2 years later came another son, Thomas, named for Tom, who had become like family to them. Tom himself was overjoyed at the honor, declaring that young Thomas would grow up to be the finest rancher in the territory. Through it all, Clara never forgot the woman she had been that September day in the alley, digging through trash with hollow cheeks and hollow hope. That memory kept her grounded, kept her grateful for every blessing, every ordinary day. She made it her mission to help others the way James had helped her, always with food ready for a hungry traveler, always with a kind word for someone struggling. James watched his wife's generosity with pride and love. The scared, desperate woman he had found in that alley had blossomed into a confident, loving mother and partner. She ran their household with efficiency and warmth, raised their children with wisdom and affection, and still found time to work beside him in building their future. She was his best friend, his lover, his partner, in every sense of the word. On their 10th anniversary, James took Clara back to Silver Ridge for a special dinner at the hotel restaurant, a rare treat away from the children who were being watched by Tom and Miguel. As they sat across from each other, older now, their hands marked by work and their faces touched by time, James reached across the table and took Clara's hand. "Do you remember the day we met?" he asked. "Every detail," Clara said softly. "I was digging through trash behind Morrison's store, thinking my life was over, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had been too tired to pray. I saw a woman who was too proud to give up even when she had every reason to," James said. "I saw strength and courage, and I knew I had to help. I had no idea that helping you would end up being the best thing I ever did for myself." "You saved my life, James." "No," James said gently. "We saved each other. You gave me a reason to build something beyond just a successful ranch. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose that goes deeper than just surviving. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara Colton." Clara felt the familiar sting of happy tears. Even after 10 years, James could still make her cry with his words. "I love you. Then now, always." "Always," James echoed, and they sealed the promise with a kiss. The children grew as children do. Will became his father's shadow, learning the ranch business and showing a natural talent for working with cattle and horses. Sarah had her mother's way with plants and people, tending the garden and always knowing when someone needed comfort. Young Thomas was the adventurous one, always exploring, always asking questions, keeping his parents on their toes. As the years passed into decades, the Broken Creek Ranch became known throughout the territory as a model operation. But it was known for more than just successful cattle raising. It was known as a place where people were treated fairly, where a hungry traveler could find a meal, where a hand down on his luck could find work. James and Clara had built more than a ranch. They had built a legacy of kindness and compassion, rooted in the memory of a desperate woman and a cowboy who filled her arms with supplies. Will married a schoolteacher from Silver Ridge, a smart, kind woman named Anne who fit perfectly into the family. They gave James and Clara their first grandchildren, twin boys who brought chaos and joy in equal measure. Sarah fell in love with a young doctor who set up practice in town, and they built a house near the ranch so she could stay close to her family. Thomas, restless and ambitious, went east for college but promised to return, and James and Clara believed him because their children had always kept their promises. In the spring of their 35th year of marriage, James and Clara sat on the porch of the house that had witnessed so much of their life together. They were in their 50s now, their hair touched with silver, their bodies marked by time and hard work. But their love had only deepened, mellowed like fine whiskey, stronger for all they had weathered together. "Do you have any regrets?" Clara asked, watching the sunset behind the familiar mountains. "Not a single one," James said without hesitation. "You?" Clara thought about the question seriously, as she did most things. "I regret the circumstances that brought me to that alley," she said finally. "I regret the loss of my parents, the hard times, but I do not regret anything that came after. If I had to dig through 1,000 trash piles to find you, to build this life, I would do it again in a heartbeat." James pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "You have given me everything, Clara, a home, a family, a reason to be better than I thought I could be. You are my greatest blessing." "And you are mine," Clara whispered. They sat there as darkness fell, wrapped in each other's arms, secure in the knowledge that they had built something rare and precious. Their love story had started with trash and ended with treasure, not the kind measured in gold or land, but the kind measured in shared mornings and whispered goodnights, in children's laughter and clasped hands, in a partnership that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Clara thought back to that September day in 1881, when she had been at her lowest point. Convinced that life held nothing more for her, she thought about the cowboy who had stopped, who had seen past her circumstances to the woman beneath, who had filled her arms not just with supplies but with hope. And she smiled, content in the life they had built, grateful for every moment, every challenge, every joy. Their story was not just about survival or even about love, though it was deeply both those things. It was about redemption and second chances, about kindness rippling outward to touch more lives than they could count. It was about two people who found each other when they needed it most and chose every day to keep finding each other. The Broken Creek Ranch continued to thrive under Will's eventual management, but James and Clara remained active and involved, their wisdom valued, their presence cherished. They watched their grandchildren grow, delighted in the birth of great-grandchildren, and never stopped marveling at the family they had created from such unlikely beginnings. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. There were now 4 generations of Coltons, from James and Clara down to the newest great-grandchild, a baby girl named Clara after her great-grandmother. The house and grounds were filled with laughter, music, and love. Will stood up to make a toast, his voice carrying across the assembled family. 50 years ago, my parents made a promise to each other, but their love story started even before that. When Dad saw someone in need and chose to help, and when Mom had the courage to accept that help and build something new. They taught us that family is not just about blood, but about choosing to show up for each other day after day. They taught us about resilience and kindness, about hard work and grace. Mom, Dad, thank you for showing us what real love looks like. Happy anniversary. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. James and Clara stood together, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder, both of them overwhelmed by the evidence of the life they had built. This family, this legacy, had started with a simple act of kindness in an alley in Silver Ridge, and had grown into something beyond their wildest dreams. That night, after the guests had left and the house had quieted, James and Clara walked out to the garden, now tended by Sarah but still holding echoes of the work Clara had done so many years ago. The moon was full, casting silver light across the land they loved. 50 years, Clara mused. It feels like both a lifetime and just yesterday. I know what you mean, James said. I still see that brave woman in the alley every time I look at you, and I still feel the same way I did when I first realized I was falling in love with you. What way is that? Lucky, James said simply. Incredibly, impossibly lucky. Clara turned to face him, cupping his weathered face in her hands. We have had a good life, James Colton. The best, he agreed, and kissed her under the stars that had witnessed so many of their dreams and promises. They lived many more years together, growing old with grace and dignity always side by side. James passed first peacefully in his sleep at the age of 86 with Clara holding his hand. She followed 2 years later, surrounded by the family they had created, her last words a whisper of his name. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the Broken Creek Ranch, under a spreading oak tree that James had planted the year they were married. Their headstone was simple, bearing their names, dates, and a single line that Clara had requested, "Love multiplies when shared." The ranch continued through the generations, each adding their own mark while honoring the foundation that James and Clara had built. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren, a reminder that kindness matters, that compassion changes lives, that love can bloom even in the most unlikely circumstances. And sometimes on quiet evenings when the sun sets behind the mountains and the air is soft with the promise of tomorrow, those who know how to listen claim they can hear laughter drifting from the old house and see two figures walking hand in hand through the garden, forever young, forever in love, forever home.